US President Donald Trump expressing reluctance to press ahead with his threats to impose tariffs on China.
Since Donald Trump became the 47th president, he has had his sights set on one main target, China. As he said, "We have a tremendous power over China."
We have one very big power over China, and that's tariffs.
From imposing heavy tariffs to promising denuclearization and even banning TikTok, Trump has taken a strong stance. The ongoing conflict between the US and China is a fierce battle for global dominance. Now recently, Trump has launched a trade war to force China to cut ties with Russia and back off from Taiwan. But will his tariff war bring positive results, or will it backfire on both nations? Watch till the end to find out. Trump imposes tariff war on China. Since Trump's campaign, he has been promising to impose heavy tariffs on China, saying that he would place up to 60% tariffs on goods from China and a 10% tariff on goods from countries like Mexico and Canada. When he made these promises, many were wondering how he would pursue them and achieve these goals. But after he got into power, he imposed a 10% tariff on imports of Chinese-made goods from the 1st of February 2025. Trump said that they were discussing with his administration based on the fact that China had been sending fentanyl to Mexico and Canada. According to Trump, China is an abuser and has been spreading fentanyl to the US and other countries. He also stated that the trade wars between the US and China have no winners. Many are relieved that this has been reduced from the 60% tariff that Trump mentioned on the campaign trail. Aside from China, Mexico, and Canada, Trump also focuses on the European Union. He had said, "We have a $350 billion deficit with the European Union. They treat us badly so that they will be in for tariffs." In response to Trump's tariff war, China's foreign ministry spokeswoman Mao Ning said, "We have always believed that trade wars and tariff wars have no winners." On his second day in office, Trump ordered an investigation into the US-China trade. He also threatened 100% tariffs on TikTok if China does not give half of its ownership to the US. It seems like Trump is leveraging tariffs to force China into trade negotiations. When Trump announced that he would impose a 10% tariff on all Chinese goods, China's currency and stock market fell during trading. US-China trade war. When Donald Trump had his first term as president in 2017, one of his focuses was the US-China trade war. This became one of the most defining conflicts in global economics. Trump had imposed tariffs on hundreds of billions of dollars worth of Chinese goods, accusing them of unfair trade practices and intellectual property theft. In response, China retaliated with its own tariffs on US exports, leading to global economic disruptions. Now that Trump is president again, he is expected to escalate the trade war. The war didn't end under Biden's 4 years of presidency, but Trump might just make it worse because he is threatening 100% tariffs on TikTok unless China agrees to restructure the company under the US. Trump has also been pressuring China into reducing its connections with Russia, threatening further sanctions. Many Chinese companies have found it difficult to transfer their goods to the US for cheap. However, the US is not relenting in the trade war, as they expect this to eventually boost domestic production and reduce dependence on China's imports. They also believe that China is instrumental in transferring illegal goods to other countries. The potential consequences of the trade war are highly significant on the global economy. China's Commerce Ministry has already warned that increasing tariffs will not only be bad for the US and Chinese businesses, but also disrupt the global supply chain. The prolonged trade war can lead to higher consumer prices, market volatility, and slower economic growth. American industries rely on Chinese manufacturing, especially technology and consumer goods, but they might face production challenges. Meanwhile, China is relating more with other countries like Russia to counter US policies. Aside from these tariffs, Trump's administration might take extra measures like sanctions on Chinese tech companies, financial penalties on Chinese banks, and restrictions on semiconductor exports. If the trade war intensifies, it can change global trade alliances and cause China to partner more with Europe, Russia, and other Asian nations. China responds to US tariffs. Now that Trump has threatened heavy tariffs in a potential trade war against China during his new tenure, everyone's watching how China will respond. China has been bracing itself against potential tariffs, with the foreign ministry spokesperson stating that it was committed to defending its national interests. After Trump's remarks, China's benchmark CSI 300 index dropped by 0.9%, ending a 4-day winning streak. Meanwhile, the Hang Seng China Enterprises Index, which tracks Chinese stocks, fell by 2%. Meanwhile, the Chinese people have mixed responses to Trump's decision. While some say that Trump is unpredictable and inconsistent with his decisions, others say tariffs could also impose different duties on Chinese goods. One Chinese internet user, Fortune Axe Brother, wrote on Weibo, the popular Chinese social media platform, "Why does the US go through all this trouble? In the end, the American people are the ones who would have to pay because if China doesn't export goods, American people won't even have Christmas trees." Some analysts also say that the tariff is simply a negotiating tactic and that Trump would not implement it. Trump is trying to use this to force concessions from China. Others are also wondering why Trump is threatening a tariff of 10% on Chinese imports and then higher ones of 25% on Mexico and Canada. It is still unclear whether the US will follow through on the threat, but Chinese business owners have already been affected by the US tariffs on Chinese imports in the past years. Many American consumers have bought goods from China because they are anticipating the tariffs that will be imposed. Meanwhile, many Chinese companies have moved their production to Latin America and Southeast Asia countries like Mexico and Vietnam. Even with all their efforts, China will suffer greatly due to the trade war that Trump might launch in his second term. Aside from China, the US will also suffer, losing a major source of their exports. Trump and China on Russia-Ukraine war. The Russian-Ukraine war has been under the spotlight for many years, and it shows no sign of stopping. While Russia has lost a lot of its supporters, China remains on its side, engaging with trade and ignoring all the sanctions. This has been a major concern for the United States, as it is worried that China is feeding Russia's finances to strengthen its forces in Ukraine. When Trump was inaugurated into office, he threatened even more sanctions on Russia if it did not end the war that has been plaguing Ukraine and affecting the rest of the world. Trump had said, "If they don't settle this war soon, like almost immediately, I'm going to put massive tariffs on Russia and massive taxes and also big sanctions." I don't want to do that. You know, I love the Russian people. They're great people. I don't want to do that. But we got to get this war ended. But China had responded, saying that dialogue and negotiation is the only viable way to end the war in Ukraine. According to Mao Ning, the foreign ministry spokeswoman, "We are happy to see that all parties play a constructive role and build conditions for de-escalation and the political settlement of the crisis." She reacted to a question about Trump's statement when he said that he hoped China will play a major and constructive role in ending the conflict in Ukraine. China agreed it would promote peace talks and maintain communications with both countries, but it did not show signs of breaking its relationship with Russia. China has always refused to condemn Russia over the war, having a no-limits partnership with the country. Trump has threatened to impose massive sanctions and tariffs on Russia and China if they don't settle the war soon. He suggested cutting off the Chinese banks that facilitate Russian trade and threatened to impose new economic penalties on China because it supported Russia. Trump has also made efforts to pressure other European countries to go against China and Russia to end the war. As China is the largest exporter in the world, it is quite hard for other countries to sanction or break off their relations with them. Only the United States has the strength and influence to start a trade war with China, as the US wants to remain the most powerful country in the world. Despite his tough rhetoric, Trump has also hinted at a desire to negotiate peace between Russia and Ukraine. He has positioned himself as a potential mediator, aiming to broker a settlement to end the war on terms favorable to US interests. However, skepticism remains high, as his past foreign policy decisions have often been unpredictable. With the Russia-Ukraine war dragging on, Trump has revealed his strategy, which will involve economic pressure, diplomatic negotiations, and deals with China and Russia. It's unclear whether this will be successful, but it is clear that the US, China, and Russia have important stakes in Ukraine. China fighting for Taiwan. Another goal of Trump as president is to settle the conflict between Taiwan and China. Trump's stance on the economic competition with China has been clear, and he has always wanted to continue his trade war. However, regarding security issues, including the escalation of conflict in Taiwan, Trump has been quite ambiguous. Meanwhile, China has been proceeding quickly with military modernization, especially due to its claims to Taiwan as a part of its country. To stop this, Trump has decided to negotiate with China on Taiwan. This is part of the economic leverage that the U.S. has over China, or at least that Trump believes it has. Trump plans to impose heavy tariffs on China, which might be his bargaining chip to force China to back down from Taiwan. China considers Taiwan a breakaway province and has vowed to reunite it with the mainland by force if necessary. To achieve this, China has increased military fights near Taiwan by 300%, squeezing into Taiwan and placing a lot of pressure on the Taiwanese government. China has been increasing military activity near Taiwan, flying fighter jets into the air defense zone, conducting naval exercises, and increasing diplomatic and economic pressure on Taiwan. But the U.S. has always been on the side of Taiwan, supporting them through arms sales and military aid. This has affected China's relationship with China. Still, Donald Trump is confident he can pressure China to ease tensions over Taiwan, although it is unclear whether China will give in. China is much more powerful than it was years ago, and many countries rely on its exports. Although a trade war with the U.S. can affect its economy, it doesn't stop China from standing its ground. Taiwan is also an important region for both the U.S. and China. Taiwan is an important ally in the Indo-Pacific region for the U.S., and it can provide checks and balances against China. However, China, conversely, sees Taiwan as a matter of its national sovereignty and will not tolerate external interference. Trump's approach to Taiwan could determine whether tensions escalate or ease in the coming years. If he pushes too hard with economic threats, China may respond with military escalation or increased pressure on Taiwan's government. However, if he can successfully leverage trade negotiations to find common ground, he may prevent an all-out crisis. Energy policy and AI competition. The trade war between China and the U.S. is multidimensional, including energy policy and AI competition. Although Trump is saying we have tremendous power over China, there's no telling whether this is true. China and the U.S. are currently competing in a major energy sector competition. This is especially true of renewable energy technologies like solar power. Both countries are always vying for global dominance in different sectors, including the energy industry, using trade barriers and subsidies to protect their domestic industries. The U.S. and China mostly compete in clean energy, developing and producing clean energy technologies like solar panels, critical minerals, and electric vehicle batteries. However, both countries took their competition to the next level by imposing tariffs on each other's energy products, leading to a trade warlock. China now has a bigger market share than the U.S. in clean energy sectors. But the U.S. is not sitting back and waiting. There are many races between the U.S. and China, and one of these is the AI race. Stakes are rising in the current U.S.-China AI race, especially since AI has extensive applications in autonomous weapon systems. Experts say the U.S. has had the upper hand for a long time, but China is quickly catching up. The two countries are approaching the AI race in different ways. At the same time, China's strategy is focused on centralized planning, with the state funding specific AI projects and developing national computing centers. Meanwhile, the U.S. has been relying on private enterprises instead, with many of them using open-source models. CIA paying attention to Chinese officials. Trump made a shocking decision to hire John Ratcliffe as the new chief of the CIA, but this led to much opposition. Still, he stuck with his decision, and Ratcliffe has just admitted that he would increase focus on China and target the Chinese Communist Party officials. As tensions between the two global powers increase, Ratcliffe has vowed to intensify the covert operations targeting the Chinese Communist Party officials. It aims to counter China's growing economic, technological, and military influence. Under Ratcliffe's leadership, the CIA has tripled its budget for China-related intelligence operations, reflecting Washington's strategic shift toward viewing China as its primary global rival. These operations include expanded surveillance, cyber espionage, and the recruitment of key informants within China's political and economic elite. The increased funding also supports counterintelligence efforts to combat Chinese spying activities in the U.S., particularly in academia, corporate sectors, and military research. This aggressive approach also fits the broad U.S. policies under Trump's renewed presidency. Since Trump is focused on reducing China's global ambitions through sanctions and financial pressure, the CIA is following suit with its covert operations. However, operations like this can also provoke retaliation from China. China also has impressive counterintelligence measures, so it won't be hard to crack down on suspected U.S. spies. Forced labor in China. The US has been watching China closely and looking for any fault. But one of these is the cases of forced labor in the Asian country. The seriousness of forced labor in China was revealed by the fast fashion giant Shein, which attracted a lot of scrutiny when the allegations were revealed. It was revealed that the cotton used in Shein was linked to forced labor in China's Xinjiang region. The company has denied these claims, saying that its products comply with all U.S. import regulations and do not use Xinjiang cotton. This is just one of the cases of forced labor, as the U.S. realized that China was putting many people in secret prisons, shocking the world. Under the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act, UFLPA, the United States has banned imports of goods connected to forced labor in Xinjiang, where the Chinese government has been accused of detaining and exploiting Uyghur Muslims. It's hard to verify whether Shein gets its materials from ethical sources because of its supply chain across China. Still, Shein faced much pressure in the U.S., with lawmakers calling for more transparency in its sourcing practices. China's TikTok used for surveillance. Aside from Shein, there's a new development in the relationship between China and the U.S., and it all boils down to TikTok. The famous short-form video app has faced much scrutiny over its data collection practices and potential national security risks. Experts say that TikTok acts as legal malware, extensively tracking audio, video, and location data. As its parent company is based in China, it raises concerns that the Chinese government can access user data under China's data security laws. Trump had also accused China of using TikTok to spy on the United States citizens. TikTok has been banned in the U.S., and citizens cannot use the app now. Trump is still in talks with the owners of TikTok to come up with a common ground. TikTok has over 150 million American users. U.S. lawmakers have debated potential bans and restrictions, arguing that TikTok's vast surveillance capabilities pose a serious risk to national security and user privacy. Reports indicate that the app collects far more data than necessary, including keystrokes, device information, and real-time location tracking. While TikTok has repeatedly denied sharing data with Beijing, critics remain skeptical, pointing to past revelations that ByteDance employees accessed U.S. user data. The Biden administration and Congress continue to explore measures to limit TikTok's influence in the U.S., including forced divestiture from ByteDance or an outright ban. With over 150 million American users, TikTok remains a political and security flashpoint as officials weigh the risks of its deep-rooted surveillance capabilities against its massive cultural impact. China on nuclear disarmament and Japan. As Trump claims, we have tremendous power over China, he has been discussing some nuclear disarmament talks with Russia and China. China has urged the United States and Russia to reduce their nuclear stockpiles before it affects the world. Although China does not favor disarmament in principle, it has regularly rejected the U.S.'s invitations to join the U.S.-Russia disarmament talks. With all the pressure from the U.S., Russia has agreed to engage in nuclear disarmament talks. However, the U.S. is also suspicious of China, especially since its military has been expanding rapidly. Trump has repeatedly warned that Beijing is modernizing its nuclear forces at an unprecedented pace, a factor that could complicate future disarmament negotiations. The U.S. aims to bring China into broader arms control agreements, but Beijing has historically resisted such talks, arguing that its stockpile is much smaller than those of the U.S. and Russia. Meanwhile, Japan has also been trying to counterbalance China's influence in the Indo-Pacific. The geopolitical tensions in the Indo-Pacific region drive strong security partnerships, with Japan working with the U.S. to fight against China's growing military. Japan has been concerned about China's aggressive stance towards Taiwan and its increasing naval and air force activities in the East China Sea. Japan has been cooperating with other countries like South Korea, the U.S., Australia, India, and the Philippines to gain an edge over China. The alliance has led to expanded military exercises, intelligence sharing, and enhanced missile defense cooperation. With China's territorial ambitions growing and North Korea advancing its nuclear program, Japan sees closer ties with the U.S. and regional allies as essential for maintaining stability in the Pacific. Do you think Trump can maintain his power over China? Or will China find a way to counter this? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.